Analysts have reiterated that South Africa's collapsing state is the main reason behind the country's underperforming economy. This is revealed in a report by Harvard Kennedy School's Growth Lab, which argues that the current reform momentum is unlikely to reverse the collapse. Political gridlock, ideology, patronage and overburdened state entities have been cited as impediments. Executive Director at the Center for Development and Enterprise, Anne Bernstein, speaks to us about this. Thank you so much for your time this morning. And the CDE is a prominent commentator on economic activity in South Africa. Would you say that this report captures the core of South Africa's economic challenges?
I think it's a very important report, and I should tell your listeners that we were involved in bringing the Harvard Growth Lab to South Africa to work with the South African Treasury. So I'm not an totally independent observer of their document, but in my view, it spells out clearly some of the issues that have not been dealt with in South Africa very forcefully up till now. So we have yet to have an explanation from the government or the president as to why South Africa is in such terrible crisis on so many fronts. And what the Harvard report does is to grapple with the why. And what you've just read out, the issue of state collapse, is an absolutely fundamental cause of why South Africa is doing so badly. And they spell out what they think are the key ingredients in causing the collapse that we're all seeing all around us, from local government to the ports, to power, to crime, which is rising, and many other things. So I think this is an important report, and we would recommend that people read it carefully.
Now, and the issues raised in this report are not new in a South African dispensation that has seen economic turmoil for over 2 decades. What's to be said about the lack of transparency, a clear stance, as well as a roadmap towards the implementation of the reforms that we often hear about, bandied about with regards to politicians as simple rhetoric, because the picture has not changed?
Well, CDE recently released a report. It was our second one on growth this year. And the main conclusion is that a country has to stop falling before we can start rising. So we have to focus on the absolutely critical issues that are causing South Africa's troubles. And the Harvard Growth Lab report and Professor Ricardo Hausman have spelt out their view of this, which we broadly agree with. And we're saying that you have to stop certain things, and then you have to prioritize, that a country like this must prioritize, and that until we deal with the ports and logistic issues, which just get worse and worse, until we're serious about fixing the energy crisis and establishing an effective market for providing energy and transmitting energy across the country. And then we have to deal with security and crime issues. So on the one hand, we have crime that citizens are experiencing, that firms are experiencing, the new sort of development of construction mafias and other kinds of mafias that are determined to prevent development in local communities or to make sure that they unfairly get a slice of the goodies available from such development. But we also need to build the state's own capacity to deal with crime within its ranks. And this is a very difficult thing to do. So we're saying the country has to prioritize on those 3 things, and until we do that, we're not going to make progress. Now, this requires real leadership. Leadership to say, we don't have the right people in the cabinet. We need really competent people to implement the reforms that are required, and a real commitment to serving the public. And we need a united cabinet that all agree on the reforms that are necessary. so far less disagreement within South Africa's top executive body. But it's all about leadership, and that's in many ways the critical thing that South Africa is lacking, which then leads to the appointment of the wrong people at SOEs or in the cabinet or senior positions in the civil service, and it sort of carries on downwards. And until we do that, until we say we're a country in real trouble, in real crisis, and that's that we need new people to deal with the challenges that we have. Why have we got an energy crisis that's 15 years old? Professor Ricardo Hausman talks in his report about other countries that have had energy crises. It's not that uncommon, but they fix them within about 5 years, whether it's Jordan or Chile, other developing countries, they fix their energy crisis. We seem to go round and round and round, and it's not quite clear who's in charge. We don't have a CEO for Eskom. We have a number of ministers involved in this who disagree with each other, and that's why we sit some nearly 15, 16 years from when the energy crisis first began. We sit with an even worse energy crisis, and it's hard to see how we get out of this in the present circumstances.
As a parting shot, and I'm glad that you raised the leadership aspect there, and because we are going towards the 2024 elections, much of the change that you speak of has also not materialized in the South African discourse, but much of the same reforms that are being called for are used as political tools to garner support going into the voting season. What's to be said about this particular report that has seen criticism that we do not need a global body telling us of our own problems? They should be as clear as daylight, particularly to the political leadership.
Well, I think it's often useful for outsiders to look at a country and to have their view on what the key issues are facing South Africa. And they are critical of where we are. They also have some exciting new proposals for the country if we were to get the leadership committed to developing South Africa. So I think bringing foreigners to look at South Africa can often be helpful. I'm not sure what to say about the elections next year. They're very important. I think the country is reaching a turning point. If we don't get new leadership and a new commitment to actually put the best people in charge of our many crises, we're going to be in even deeper trouble. Think about it for a moment. We're in such deep trouble that the leading CEOs in South Africa have had to stop what they're doing, which is to run their companies in difficult circumstances, and to help the country to fix our ports, our energy, and our criminal security situation. This is a real indictment on the capacity of this government to run South Africa properly.
Thank you so much for your insights there, Anne.
They should vote wisely in 2024.
Thank you very much for your insights this morning. Anne Bernstein, the Executive Director at CDE, talking us through that Harvard report looking at South Africa's economic challenges.